I want to solve all three of these rational equations. This one, hopefully you realize, is called a proportion. Whenever you have a fraction equal to a fraction, it's called a proportion. So all we do is we multiply diagonally right here and multiply diagonally here. It's called cross multiply for a proportion. This becomes 21x, this becomes 3x plus 1 when you distribute. And then we just solve for x. So minus 3x over, divide by 18. There's our answer. Right here, this is not a proportion. It's not a fraction equal to a fraction. Now I could make this into a fraction and do a cross multiply. But there's something easier, which I call fraction busters. And what we do is we look for the LCD. What is the LCD of these three denominators? And what I do is I multiply it by everything, all three fractions. So what I do is I take the first denominator, 8x, and I look at the second one, and I go, does 8x, to get a lowest common denominator, does 2 go into 8x? Yeah, so I don't need anything else. Because the 8x control has enough, the 2 fits in the 8x. Go to the next one. Does 4x go into 8x? Actually, it does. So what's funny is the first one ends up being the LCD on this one. It doesn't always happen that way, but for this particular one, the first denominator is the lowest common denominator. Sometimes you have to introduce more information as you go along to all the denominators to find the lowest common denominator. Now you could also just multiply all of this. Instead of just using 8x, you could have multiplied all this and got a rather large number. It looks like it'd be, in my mind, 64x squared, and multiply all the tops by 64x squared. That's a lot more complicated, but you could. I would just take the lowest common denominator and multiply all tops by it. Because watch what happens. When you multiply this one, it cancels, leaving you 5. When you multiply this one right here, the 8 over x, the 8 cancels with the 2, leaving you 4. 4 times 3, we get 4x times 3, 12x, the minus. And then when you cancel 8x with 4x, that leaves you a 2 on top. 2 times 1 is 2. Now it's a simple problem. Solve. Minus the 5, divide by negative 12, 1/4. So again, you find the LCD, you multiply everything by it. That goes with this one as well. If you find the LCD, then you multiply everything by it. Now, for this particular problem, what we have here is a mistake. This right here is not called a GCF. If you look at this, what you'll notice is if I pull a GCF out of this, this is x plus 1 for this, when I factor that. See right here, this is 2x. When I factor this bottom right here, this is x times x plus 1. Now, when I want a LCD is what I should call this. LCD. That's not a liquid crystal display. Lowest common denominator. My lowest common denominator would be 2x when all of the first, and you go to the second when you factor it, and you go, okay, do I need an x? He already has one. But I do need x plus 1. So my LCD is 2x times x plus 1. Now, from there, what you do is you multiply that LCD by all three pieces. Again, how do you find your LCD? You take the first denominator, all of it, and you go to your second one once it's factored and see what else do I need? What else is new that's not in the first? Anyways, kind of like with over here. And okay, multiply all three by it. And what happens is when you multiply this first piece, the 2x's cancel, and then you distribute the 3. Here you cancel the x's, leaving you a 2, and the x plus 1s, and 2 times x is 2x. Don't forget minus. And here the 1 basically is worthless because when you multiply by 1 it doesn't change anything. But I do distribute the 2x times both those, leaving you 2x squared plus 2x. And then from here I get it equal to 0. Looks like I'm going to combine this over here. This plus this is right there. And then I minus these two over, equal to 0. It's a quadratic, so I factor. Multiply 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 1 on bottom. That would be 3 and negative 2. Divide by 2. Because the front piece, divide both by 2. This doesn't reduce, so bring the 2 up. This does reduce. So your answer, you set this equal to 0 and this equal to 0. When you set this equal to 0, you get this. But again, I see a mistake because what I can see here is this should be a plus. And when you solve that, this actually becomes a negative 3 over 2. Little mistakes. And this one, when you set equal to 0, you get a positive 1. So, now, sometimes with this problem, you have to use a quadratic formula. Sometimes it works out nice and neat. It all depends. But again, find the LCD, multiply each piece by it, and then you got to solve. There's a lot of solving here. Sometimes there's quadratics again. Be careful.